Book 3, Chapter 66, continuing with verse 20. If you will only turn to the side of your subjectivity, the side of your subjective consciousness, you will get rid of the objective world. In the same manner as one is freed from his fear of snake in a rope by his examination of the thing. It is possible to get rid of the restless mind, which is the source of all our desires. Then it is possible for anyone to attain the chief end of liberation. So Vasishtha has made a very important statement that has given us the key to achieving Jivan Mukti. And that is connect with the silent witness. Turn to the side of your subjective consciousness. That's the silent witness. And only by connecting with that do you understand. You are unbounded, pure awareness, pure being. Verse 22. When high-minded men are seen to give up their lives like straws in an honorable cause, there is no reason why they should be reluctant to abandon their desires for the sake of their chief good of liberation. Now, Vasishtha is speaking to the ego. He's simply pointing out to the ego how easy it is to just let go and become the self. Remain unfettered by forsaking the desires of your greedy mind. What is the good of getting sensible objects that we are sure to lose? The liberated are already in sight of the immortality of their souls and of God, like one who has fruit in his hand or sees a mountain visible before him. It is only the Spirit of God that abides in everything in these world appearances, which rise to be seen like the waves of the waters of the great deluge. It is his knowledge that is attended with the supreme good of liberation. Ignorance of that supreme being binds the mind to the interminable bondage of the world. So the path is very clearly delineated here. If anyone has any doubt, it's very simple. Connect with the silent witness, become the silent witness. You are finished. When one is identified with the silent witness, there's no problem with the mind. The mind, it can even entertain thoughts. There can be issues with karmic traces, and there's no problem. Initially, on the path to achieving Moksha level 1, Jivan Mukti. One does not have a full balancing of every karmic trace. In fact, all that's necessary is to have enough karmic traces balanced that one can maintain the connection with the silent witness 24 hours a day. One can be the silent witness 24 hours a day only when there's enough space in the collection of karmic traces to allow that to happen. Karmic traces have always been dominating. They have habitually been who we think we are. We think we are these karmic traces. That's the illusion. So it's also a matter of breaking a habit. Breaking the habit of paying attention to thoughts. Oh, somebody might say, maybe that thought is from God. Maybe that's a divine thought that I'm having. So that's a big mistake too, isn't it? No mind, I am the self. Very, very clear description of Jivan Mukti. There are no thoughts. Now, when someone who has achieved Jivan Mukti is called upon to respond to the environment by making a statement, one could argue, oh, well, that person is having a thought. He's thinking about what he's going to say, and now he's saying what he thought about. Doesn't work that way at all. Simply, there is speech. And the words that come out in that speech are not planned out in advance. All right, I'm going to say this, I'm thinking about this. So if I say this, then those that are listening will have a good response. No, it's not like that at all. One simply reacts to the environment. The environment is there. And one reacts to it spontaneously. And every action is supportive of the entire universe, because every action taken in the environment, which is at its fundamental the divine karmic traces expressing themselves, the laws of nature, the will of God, every action taken by someone who has achieved Jivan Mukti is simply resonating those divine karmic traces into the environment. Like the sound of wind rustling the leaves in the trees. The speech of someone who has achieved Jivan Mukti is the same. It is just a response from the divine karmic traces. into the environment. And whoever is in that environment perceives that sound. And the perception of that sound is based on their karma, their karmic traces. If their karmic traces are dominating their life, then they will have a certain perception of that sound, won't they? Based on those karmic traces. If they have no karmic traces dominating their life, in other words, they are also established in Jivan Mukti, then the sound will be the music of nature, the beautiful music of nature. So we have this one simple task. Connect with the silent witness, become the silent witness, maintain that perspective, and you've arrived. Now, when we can't do that, then we know there are some karmic traces at work. So we perform a few actions that are guaranteed to be in alignment with the divine karmic traces, like the Sahasra Sirsha Brahma meditation. That's a period of time in which everything that you do during that period of 83 minutes is completely in accord with all the divine karmic traces. It's a period of time when you're not generating any karma. You're making no karmic traces. And in fact, you're balancing karmic traces. It's a very good way to spend one's time prior to achieving Jivan Mukti. It's also a very good way to spend one's time after achieving Jivan Mukti. Because remember, when we achieve Moksha level 1, and we are completely, always, totally connected with and observing everything that goes on in the illusory world dominated by individual karmic traces of the dream creatures, with the backdrop of divine karmic traces. We have some individual karmic traces still on the fringes. I like to compare it to cutting a tunnel or drilling a hole through the mountain ranges of karma. Whenever I see the Rocky Mountains in the United States from the plains of the state of Kansas, it's an amazing and beautiful sight. Massive, endless mountain range going left and right for as far as the eye can see and very high into the sky. And then I'm reminded of what Maharishi said. We all have mountain ranges of karma to deal with, mountain ranges of karma. So the Rocky Mountains are just a little bit of the karma that we have to work with. But behind those mountains is the divine karmic traces. So if we could just cut a hole in those mountains, bore a hole in those mountains, we could just go right through them, and we could see actually from this side the divine karmic traces. And it is the vision of the divine karmic traces that is like a beacon for maintaining connection with the silent witness. In fact, every time we connect with the silent witness, it's like we're looking through the forest and seeing a glimpse of the sun between the branches of the trees and the leaves on the trees. We see a glimpse of the sun, and then we grab onto that. We become that. We are that beautiful light of the sun. Then the wind moves the branch. We lose sight of the light of the sun. But we know where it is. We know that the silent witness is always there. So we just go back to it. That is our number one practice for 83 minutes during the Sahasra Sirsha Brahma meditation. And if we're fortunate enough to have a connection with our Acharya Devata Guru, it makes it even easier. Our Guru is literally our very best friend in the entire universe. Acharya Devata Guru has volunteered to take you by the hand and lead you through the maze of your individual karmic traces to the divine karmic traces and beyond. And your Acharya Devata Guru knows the way beyond the divine karmic traces. An excellent mountain guide. So you won't get lost on the way. So when you make connection with your Acharya Devata Guru during meditation, don't let go of it, just like you don't let go of the silent witness. Your Acharya Devata Guru is with you 24 hours a day. And we say, oh, he's there watching, meditating with me. That's just getting you started in the relationship. But the relationship is permanent and it is constant. And it is the silent witness. Your Acharya Devata Guru is the silent witness. So when you make that connection, you're reinforcing that connection with the silent witness. Continuing with verse 67, lecture on creation. still consciousness and moving thought. Brahma said, leaving the mind, please tell me more about the nature of the individual soul. What relation does it have to the Supreme Soul? How did the individual soul spring from Supreme Soul? And what is its essence? Well, this individual soul that Ram is referring to, we sometimes call the Jiva. And the Supreme Soul is Shiva. It's not a coincidence that Jiva and Shiva sound kind of the same, don't they? Vasishtha replied, know that Brahma is omnipresent and is the Lord of all at all times. He manifests himself in whatever attribute he assumes to himself of his free will. The attribute which the universal soul assumes to itself in the form of perception, Chaitanya, is known by the term individual soul, which possesses the power of volition in itself. There are two causal principles combined with the individual soul, namely its predestination resulting from its prior acts and volitions, and its later free will. These branch forth severally into various causes of birth, death, and existence of beings. So in these 4 verses, actually 3 verses from 2 to 4, Vasishtha is encapsulating the concept of pragyaparad, the initial mistake of the intellect, the mistake being, I exist. And as soon as that occurs, we have the individual soul. We have the jiva. So as soon as the jiva arises, and the jiva is very determined to exercise what he thinks is his free will. You see, his free will, the free will of the jiva, is an illusion, isn't it? It's an illusion based on the free will of Shiva. You look in a mirror, you see an image there, and it has a hand. And it can raise that hand and wave to you. But of course, you know you're the one raising the hand, and you're the one waving, and the mirror is just a reflection of that. Well, the jiva, as soon as it says, I am free, I exist, is like the image in the mirror thinking it is doing something. It is waving its hand. And that it has the ability to wave its hand. But it doesn't, of course. It is only a reflection of the eternal, pure being. So we have a question. It is so that moksha level 1 to 5 are different chaitanyas. Yes, different forms of perception. Well, indeed, that's exactly correct. Moksha means liberation, freedom. From what? Freedom from boundaries, freedom from containment, freedom from individual karmic traces. But we know that if we peel the onion of individual karmic traces, layer after layer after layer, someday, eventually, we're going to get to the core of the onion, aren't we? As we peel back these layers, the onion becomes smaller. As the onion becomes smaller, more of the environment around the onion is perceptible, isn't it? Because the onion is blocking the perception of that which is around it. As the perception expands by the shrinking of the onion of individual karmic traces, by peeling them off layer after layer, then we have the experience of different levels of moksha. Now, this concept of peeling the layers of individual karmic traces is a very valid way of thinking about what's going on when we're practicing our dharana meditation with the mantra. That's what the mantra is doing. It is vibrating at a frequency that melts or balances the surface level of the mountain ranges of karma. And the mountain range of karma becomes a little less jagged, a little shorter, a little less tall, loses elevation with every meditation. So a layer is peeled away. But we have another technique which slices vertically through the mountain ranges of karma, like a chainsaw. If you could imagine a giant individual with a chainsaw, a huge chainsaw slicing straight through the Rocky Mountains from top to bottom. Makes a very thin vertical cut. Goes all the way to the core, to the Pragya Parad. Every time we perform the esoteric Maha Mantra Sanyama, we are doing just that. We're slicing through the whole network of individual karmic traces. And we're creating a fracture in this network. And so if we do that enough times, you can imagine the whole mountain range is going to come tumbling down, isn't it? it's going to make the work of the mantra so much easier. For one thing, it's exposing greater surface area, isn't it? When you cut through something vertically, let's say you have a log and you slice through the log. Now the surface area of the log goes into the crevice that you have sliced. So now the mantra can operate deep in that crevice as well and balance karmic traces. Makes the whole process of dharana much more effective. They work together that way. And so we practice what we call Trimana Sanyama, in which simultaneously we're engaging parts of ourself to think the mantra, conscious thinking mind, while the subtle minds are performing sanyama on the esoteric mantra. This is a very big amplification of the power of a simple practice of thinking the mantra. Because now the mantra can go into all these vertical grooves that have been cut by every sanyama cycle of the esoteric Maha Mantra. Fantastic acceleration of the process. Because our objective, of course, is Moksha level 5, and the start of Moksha level 5 is quite different from the end of Moksha level 5. Dramatically different, fundamentally different. Because at the end of Moksha level 5, when one has achieved level of consciousness 1000, one ceases to exist. That original karmic trace, I exist, has been erased. And ta-da, we are finished. Verse 5. Brahma said, such being the case, tell me, O greatest of sages, what does this predestination mean? What do these acts? What are these acts, and how did they become the causal agents of subsequent events? Now, Vasishtha is going to go deeply into the construction of the network of individual karmic traces. Because we are demolition workers. We've been tasked with demolishing that building over there. What's the best way to do it? Well, you have to know a little bit about it. If you're a demolition expert, what do? You go inside the building, you look around, you see where all the supports are. Very big and tall building. There's a lot of rooms, many floors. And you have to do something so that it basically collapses into its own footprint, becoming dust and then is blown away by the wind. I'm reminded of that amazing sight on September 11, 2001, which many of us got to see on television as it was happening. Those buildings just being demolished. And the way they demolished them was first they went into those buildings before the event was staged, and they placed a lot of explosive charges throughout those buildings at critical support junctions. Then they tied them together in a network of communication. And then they pulled the building, as the leaser of the building stated when asked about Building 7. Building 7, of course, is the third tower. It's a smaller tower. Was not hit by either airplane. And so anyone with half a brain cell left was curious. How come the airplanes hit the first twin tower and it fell down, and then another airplane hit the second twin tower and it fell down, and then the third one fell down, but nothing hit it? Oh, he says, there was such great loss of life and destruction that we decided to pull it. He literally said that on television for everybody to hear, basically revealing the whole hoax of the terror attack. But by now, there's a pretty good group of people that understand what happened on September 11, 2001. Vashishta replied, consciousness, Chit, has its own nature or properties of vibration and rest, like the movement and stillness of wind in the air. Its agitation is the cause of its action. Otherwise, it is calm and quiet as a dead block of stone. Its vibration appears in the fluctuations of the mind, and its calmness in the lack of mental activity and exertion, as in the detachment of the stillness of yoga and meditation. This is a very good description of human activity motivated by individual karmic traces, isn't it? It's perfect. The activity of the human being, the creation of the human being, we're all creating things. When we create something in this illusion, we're creating an illusion on top of the illusion, aren't we? Just like the government decided, well, let's scare everybody so that we can become more in control of their lives when they planned the events of September 11, 2001. It was a conscious decision. There are people that were actually planning all this out. Well, we'll blame it on these hijackers. And that will give us the reason to put a lot of additional barriers and obstacles in the paths of the citizen so we can control them better. Same thing happened in March of 2020 when the coronavirus appeared on the scene, the ultimate terrorist, the little invisible thing that sneaks around and kills everything it touches. That should scare everybody completely out of their wits and give us a lot of control, they thought. And they were right. But what they're doing is just a reflection of creativity. It's not creativity. They're not creating anything. They're just vibrating the illusion. They're making the illusion a little bit different. That's what they're doing. And so there are two levels of consciousness: pure consciousness, Shiva, and the consciousness of the individual. Because this is clearly illustrated in verse 7. Its vibration appears in the fluctuations of the mind and its calmness in the lack of mental activity and exertions. See, when pure consciousness manifests or creates something, there's a vibration in pure consciousness that results in the manifestation. When normal consciousness creates something, there's a vibration in the consciousness of the individual that creates whatever it is the individual karmic traces have in store to be created. But when the person is momentarily not thinking, then it's like someone in the stillness of yoga meditation. So this also points out that we can be in a state of no mind, I am the self, and to be completely embedded in the illusion. It is a false sense of moksha, a false sense of liberation. A little bit like looking at yourself in the mirror. When you look at yourself in the mirror, who do you see? You see, as best as you can, the most ideal version of yourself, don't you? That's why sometimes people are horrified to see a photograph of them. Oh, that doesn't look like me at all. I don't look like that. Here, let me show you. I'll look here in the mirror. This is what I look like. No, you don't. You don't look like that thing in the mirror. You look like a picture in the photograph. The picture in the photograph is static, and you're not able to make minute adjustments like you can to the live image in the mirror to make it look its very best. So you're kind of stuck with it, the way it really looks. That's the way you really look. Well, that vision in the mirror is kind of like the ego tricking itself, tricking you into thinking you have achieved Jivan Mukti. it will sort of hide all the thoughts, push them aside a little bit, and pretend, oh yes, I am the silent witness. I am witnessing everything. So you arrive at a state of false Jivan Mukti.